So both the Minnesota Lynx and the New York Liberty have taken losses. What does it mean? Does it mean anything? I think the biggest takeaway is that weaknesses were exposed. And I think if you were really paying attention, the weaknesses or what led to the losses have been there all season. And it just manifested to a loss in this instance. And, it was bound to happen. Every team is beatable at some point. It's the matter of who can beat them in a series. And I still think that these teams are two teams to beat in a series. And I think that they're still both championship contenders. I think that something that people are overlooking is that Breanna Stewart is struggling to start this season. And it's funny to say that because she's still averaging 19 points, but that's slightly under what she's averaging for her career. She's shooting 13% from three. She's typically a 35% shooter. And the Liberty struggled throughout that Indiana Fever matchup from three. And two of their best three-point shooters were out. And people want to downplay that like it doesn't mean anything, but that is huge. Fiebich is their second best three-point shooter, and she's overseas due to Eurobasket commitments. Jonquel Jones is struggling with her ankle, but she should be back in the matchup on Tuesday. But those are two big hits, and those are two starters. And you could tell in this game that they were missing them. There was there was missing cohesion in their offense. And they went on droughts throughout this game, and often that's not a regular thing for this team. In episode 8 of Let's Talk Hoops, I talked about how the Liberty didn't throw the first punch against the Fever, and someone countered me to say that the Liberty led the Fever 17-6 at one point in the first quarter. But I just have to remind you that nearly the first 5 minutes of that quarter, they were trading buckets. There were errors on the Fever's end that were some costly mistakes, and the Liberty was able to take advantage of that, and that's what stretched the lead out. But then it was off the back of Sydney Colson's defense that sparked the run that led to the most unreal 38 seconds we've seen in basketball since Steph Curry at the Olympics, with Caitlin Clark hitting back-to-back 30-foot threes. But before then, I would hardly say that the Liberty threw the first punch. I consider that sparring. I could tell from that first quarter that Indiana was gonna take that game. The momentum was just too big. Clark was just on a roll, and when she's rolling, the rest of her team is rolling, and Lexie Hull is rolling. When Clark can get Lexie Hull going, and Lexie Hull can get into double figures, they're a better team offensively. Aaliyah Boston and Kelsey Mitchell are pretty much always solid, but their X factor will always be Lexie Hull. It was pretty much all Fever for most of the game. There was one point in the third quarter where the Liberty had a little lead, but then the Fever went like on a 17-0 run. The Liberty missed seven back-to-back shots, and it's hard to win a game when you're shooting that poorly. So with New York, some of the mistakes that I see them make, or what their weaknesses are, rather, I look back to their first matchup where they beat the Fever by just two, and they had Jonquel Jones and Fiebich. But there was a moment they should have beat the Fever by more in that matchup. You can see during the opening stretches what the Liberty could be. They were on a roll like in that first quarter, but when they were up in the third, the Liberty just had bad shot selection. And granted, I'm not going to take away from the Fever's defense. I think Sophie Cunningham really did a lot for them defensively that sparked that momentum to get them back in that game. But outside of what the Fever did, a lot of the mistakes that New York made were mental mistakes on their end, and it was just poor shot selection, and that's what made the game so close. So I don't think that the Fever could beat New York in a series. I don't think there's many teams out there that could beat New York in a series, but I don't think that this recent win against New York is telling as to what New York is or what they're going to be down the line. I don't see Breanna Stewart staying in this slump for the duration of this season. I think that she's still recovering from her injury, and I just expect her to come out of that or to adjust. Hey, if her three-point shot isn't falling this season, I expect her to adjust in other ways. What I can say is that this was a good game from the Fever with all of their pieces. They were missing Dewana Bonner, and they still put on a great effort. So that's something for the front office to think about because Dewana Bonner is one of the highest paid players on the team. And I don't know if they're looking for other pieces, but it's just something to consider that they were able to put on such a strong performance without her. And at best, she's been a solid role player for them. She's had standout moments, but she's been a role player and she's a pretty high paid role player. And I don't know if that's the role that they anticipated her having when they brought her in on such a hefty contract. With the Minnesota Lynx, it's been a matter of their turnovers all season, and that is what happened in the matchup against Seattle in that loss. They had, what was it, 13 turnovers and conceded 22 points from them? Yeah, so I'm looking. 13 turnovers, they conceded 22 points off of those turnovers. And even with the teams like Dallas or just I keep bringing up Dallas because I can't believe how close that game was between Minnesota and Dallas. And Dallas had a better offensive showing in that match, and Enrique played pretty well up until the final moments of the fourth quarter. But it was really Minnesota and their mistakes that kept Dallas in that game. And that's the same thing with Seattle. Granted, Seattle is a great team, and I also think that they're a team that has the potential to be championship contenders, but they have to tighten up some of those loose ends. And I'm hoping to see that from them because they're one of my favorite teams. But really, the biggest thing for Minnesota is, like I said, it's been the turnovers. I think that that game was a wake up call because, you know, the next time out against LA, they took no mercy. Everything was tight. And I think that they're one of the most, if not the most, disciplined team in the league. I think that they take Cheryl Reeve really seriously. They do what their coach is asking of them, and it's just a matter of the series last season for the finals. I think it was just a matter of being outbested in talent when it came to losing to the Liberty. I think that the Liberty just had a stronger roster, and it's really no answer for Jonquel Jones when she's playing at her best. Like, how can you stop someone with that size in the post and from three? You're really stretching your defense thin, and I don't think that there's any team in the league that has an answer for Jonquel Jones, and I think that that's what happened in those finals. But as far as discipline goes, I think that they're one of the most, if not the most, disciplined team in the league. So I don't think that these losses show anything other than teams knowing what they need to improve on now moving forward into the season. Good teams lose, and this is a league with the best players in the world. On any given night, they can play up to beat anybody. I mean, I think that the Valkyries might have a chance at beating, you know, these teams at one point in the season just because of how well that they've been playing together as a team. And you're gonna, they're people, and you're gonna have off nights. And I think that that's what happened with New York. It was a off game for Natasha Cloud. I feel like defensively she wasn't showing us who we've seen her be. Her shot wasn't really falling like we know it can. So it's just an uncharacteristic night for a lot of the members of New York outside of Sabrina Ionescu, who had a great game, a great time out. And I thought that was great basketball to see between her and Caitlin Clark. But yeah, what are your thoughts, Hoops Tribe? How are you feeling about these two teams? Let's talk hoops.